We're going to be checking out the new release of ToysRocka. This is the Dark Knight Batman. Rather interesting collectible. Found this at my local comic book store for a very astonishing $99.99. I don't know what the price point of these should be, but that's the price that the comic book store was charging them. Let's at the very least see if ToysRocka Batman lives up to a $99 price point. Now, let's not judge Batman solely by his price points. Let's first have a look at the figure, but before we do that, we have to figure out that the figure is 5 inches in height. Exactly 5 inches in height, from the bottom of its feet all the way top to the very top points of his cowl. You're looking at a 5-inch tall figure. ToysRocka Batman comes with a ton of accessories when we first have a look at the display base. As best as I could describe it, the display base looks like just crumbled up rubble, perhaps like a roadway, so to speak, that's just been ruptured. And it does look pretty good. It's a slightly softer material, but still has some stability, sturdiness to it. You'll see that it's got a big large peg and it's got a smaller peg. It should, in theory, accommodate his feet. As you can see on the undersides, he's got one larger hole and one smaller hole. But I do find it very tricky to get his foot into the larger peg. It doesn't also help either that the way that it's been pegged, you can see that there's like a little opening underneath here. So basically, anytime you press down on it, you're ultimately pushing this through as well. So I have to kind of hold it from the underside here as I push down on Batman's foot. But it's still a very tight fit. So ultimately, what I usually do is just attach him to the one peg. It's enough that you can get Batman to stand on his base. He doesn't necessarily need the secondary peg to accommodate getting him to stand properly. Also out of packaging, he comes with his cape. The cape, and really Batman as a whole, is a very shiny looking figure. Everything on him is shiny, really except for the cowl. The cowl is about the only thing that is not of the shiny variety. You'll see right away that there are hinges on the cape, which does add a little bit extra element to the way that you display the figure. So we can go ahead and take him off the stand, put that to the side. You spin the figure around, he's got a slot here and a slot here right at the very top. And you'll see right here, there's these two little rectangular notches, and those fit right into place. I would like to be able to say that they are a fairly secure fit, but a lot of times if you are moving the cape at all, you may find that the cape does want to come out of those little tab points here. While you do have it in place, you can either have the cape draped down, straighten off his head like that. You can either have the cape straight down, or you can get a little bit more creative, and you can bring the cape out as well. And you can get it to about there. Now, adding, of course, to the fact that he has a really large head, bringing the cape back like this also makes for the figure to be very back heavy. You can really plant the feet well enough that the figure doesn't seem like it wants to fall over. Again, a little bit of balancing is required, and of course the display stand goes a long way as well to kind of help assist with that as well. But it's really neat though that you can bring the cape as far back as you can like that. I'm very intrigued actually as a whole when it comes to this particular figure. It's just got some really neat elements to it. I certainly cannot justify the price point necessarily, but I thought picking this guy up and having a look at him would be pretty cool, and I have to admit, again, in hand, he looks really impressive. I'm very intrigued by this line, if there is perhaps more of these available. So if we have a look at Batman's face, as you can see, basically he's a stylized version of the Christian Bale Dark Knight Batman. So of course, going with that, he's got the new Batman outfit. Unfortunately, so much gets lost because the plastic here they've used is a very shiny black. Ultimately, that means that as many details as they put into the figure, so much of it gets lost because there's no contrasting colors. If there was only, at the very least, the same, say, colors as cowl, mixed amongst the coloring of the shiny or black plastic, you would be able to at least differentiate between, say, you know, the areas of the armor and then the non-armored panels, the non-armored areas of his costume. But unfortunately, all of it is shiny black plastic, so it ultimately means that the figure does look busy. And busy maybe for necessarily the wrong reasons because, well, again, there's a lot going on that if you had contrasting colors of the black, contrasting levels of black, you probably would be able to make out things a little bit more other than just one shiny black presentation here. Whoops, if we try not to drop the figure, hold on one second. Quickly retrieving Batman and resuming where we left off. Again, like, he's a very small looking figure. He's very posable, which we will talk about in a second, but he's a very super overly stylized version of Batman. But I gotta admit, the head sculpt is pretty good. I do like that quite a bit. Now, maybe what's adding to the price point on this guy is the fact that he does have interchangeable mouth plates, which we will look at in a second. And he does also have the equivalent of purrs, which is something that larger scale companies like Hot Toys have introduced and used in many of their DX released 12-inch figures. To access that, all you have to really do is just take his head and remove it from the back plate. And actually, while we're doing that, I just want to take off the head, for example, and just want to show you the inner workings here. These are things that come out frequently, and I just want to bring this to your attention. The neck has both a hinging joint on the bottom as well as the same similar joint on the top, ball joint happening there. It's very oddly angled, in which the hole is actually located at the back socket, but it's located on an angle. I bring this to your attention because you may find a lot of times, if you have this figure in your collection, moving the head from time to time does pop that neck out. We'll just put the headless body right over there for a second, and actually while we're at it, we'll add the head. And actually, you know what? While we're on this topic, I also want to mention I'm very worrisome, I suppose, as to the level of, well, the peg is very narrow, and it's a very small hole that attaches to his head. So I would not probably want to do this too often, of having to take the head off the peg and having to revisit. Luckily, if you ever want to change out or move the eyes or change out the mouth plate, all you have to really do is just untab it from the top. Luckily, you don't have to pop the head off every single time you want to change anything to Batman here. So while we have that down, again, there's the close-up look at his face. If you spin it around, it does actually have independent joysticks. So you can move the eyes around, maybe not to the level of making him look like he's the Undertaker, but you can move the eyes around left and right. The problem with having these two independent from one another is you may probably find yourself looking at the figure and just adjusting the eyes regularly just to make sure that they are lined up to one another. At the very least, you don't want one eye to be wandering off to the left and then the other eye being dead centered or wandering off to the right. And we'll just kind of bring this down. It's tricky because they had put, let's see if I can bring this around here. They put this peg right in between the two joysticks. It does make things rather tricky to get your finger then in there to adjust the eyes. So I probably will not be playing with this too often, leaving it completely as is. And then there's a little tab underneath here that you can pop through the mouth. Take that out completely. And then you have two other variations in which you can use for his mouth. So we plug that back into place. There we go. And there are the two variations right there. Kind of Batman in mid-talking. I'm Batman. Where is he? Joker. The other one, and actually this one is kind of my favorite for maybe the wrong reasons. We take the mouth plate out here and we replace it with this one here. You know, actually, the mouth reminds me of something more so from like Val Kilmer's Batman rather than Christian Bale's, but you see much more visible teeth happening here on the lower. It's it's comical, but actually it's pretty cool too. Like, I keep kind of looking at it and thinking that's pretty neat. And we'll just kind of bring the eyes down just so we can actually get those corrected. There we go. And then just go ahead and replace it. All it really is, there's a little, well, these little notches on the side and the grooves on the other. You're lining those up and snapping into place. And just kind of correct the mouth if need be. Again, it looks a little crazy, but I have to admit it is cool as well. Okay, so having a look at the rest of his accessories. Currently, he has sporting 2 closed fists. Rest assured, though, that they did include some extra additional hands. They got one for holding, if I put him down for a second here. They got one for holding the Batarang, which cue the Batarang here. The Batarang looks as if it's hingeable. Stressing this to the nth degree. Do not bend this, as it does only look like it's supposed to hinge. See the little hinge seam in the middle there? It looks like it should bend. Don't bend it though. Don't bend it. There's a little slot right at the top of the hand here, and you can fit the Batarang into it. Although it is really tricky to kind of get it. There we go, trying to get it in between the fingers, because you think it actually should be further back, and it's actually closer to the thumb and fingers there. The other accessory he comes with is Grapple Gun. The Grapple Gun has much more silver in it than what I would remember. I believe this is actually supposed to be more darker gray, but instead they've given it a silver treatment. And that can fit into his other hand, on the other hand. And we can just kind of fit that in place like so. Just like that. It doesn't quite clear a trigger, but at the very least it does look like he's supposed to be holding it rather than just a gripping hand. To change out his hands can be a little difficult, because a lot of times I found that the peg wanted to stay with the hand, and that's not really what I wanted. What I wanted was just to be able to remove the hand. There we go. Oh, there goes his head again. Hold on one second. Sigh. Replacing the hand and retrieving the head. Actually, going back to the head, something else that I want to touch base on is that the head just doesn't stay well in place, as you probably have now seen in a couple of instances. It seems as if like the ledge just isn't deep enough, or at the very least they should have put like magnets or something in the inside there just to kind of keep the head in place. I don't consider myself roughhousing the figure necessarily, but yeah, you can even see it right there. The slight bit of motion and movement, that head just wants to pop right out. There just doesn't seem like there's enough keeping it together. Just kind of fix it back into place. And at any rate, anyways, we did get the hand back, the new hand in the socket. And if you don't want to display him with the grapple gun, which you can also do too, is much like in the movie, you can put the grapple gun on the back of his utility belt, which is nice. I like that. That head sculpt. Running through his posability, his head rotates all the way around. Not only does it have the hinge, as we've already discussed, at the top socket of where it basically sits inside the head, but then he's got a secondary ball joint happening at the bottom, secondary hinge joint. The arms hinge outward. They do rotate back and forth, but unfortunately, as much as these are soft, the shoulder pads do get in the way. So that's about as high up as it will go, both ways. Hinge out. He does also have a bend at the elbow, which also rotates the forearm, and you can also rotate the hands. That works actually on both sides. That's the unique ability about arms. Usually, unless they're McFarlane, usually you'll have the same posability on both sides, and that'd be the case here as well. He has an upper torso crunch. He has waist swivel, legs split out, forward and back. He has bend at the knee, which also rotates the lower foot, and he has quite a sufficient amount of articulation. Well, the feet pivot back and forth, the hinge up and down as well, and on top of that, he does also have a hinge on the toes, so you can bend those toes as well. So he's very posable. Very detailed. Very cool. It has some nitpicks, as we probably have discovered over the course of this review. Again, the price point can be something that could be a bit of a deal breaker for this particular release. But still, I think there's merits for it. I definitely would like to see what ToysRocka would do with other Batman characters. It's difficult to be interested in a figure when you see it at a comic book store and you're immediately blindsided by the price point of it. I'm not really sure why ToysRocka have these at such a high price point. They are imports, yes, which I guess can translate to why the prices on this guy is a lot higher than, you know, other figures on the market. To be fair, I guess the SH Figure Arts and other figures of that variety tend to be around a $70 to $100 price point. So this guy is on par with that, although he is a little on the smaller side. In its defense, ToysRocka Batman here at least does have the benefit of having lots of articulation and the option of switching out the mouth plates and the purse system, or their equivalent of the purse system in his head. It does unfortunately translate to a figure that at times the head does fall out way too frequently. I wish it could have tabbed into place a little bit more conveniently and a lot more securely. Maybe a magnet could have gone a long way instead of making use of just ledges and little tabs to kind of keep it in place. Same thing really can be said for the cape. The cape is not as much the issue because I'm probably not going to be moving the cape around too much, but it does tab out of place or falls out of place very frequently. He's a very posable figure, and I would entertain the idea of picking up more of these because I'm very intrigued by this line. I'd like to see what they would do with a Joker or perhaps a Bane. Unfortunately, though, the stumbling block in this is that the price point on these are fairly high. $99. I found this guy at my local comic book store. And again, it's about the same as what you would expect to pay with like the SH Figure Arts figures. Again, these are imports, so they're a little bit more expensive. But again, this could be a bit of a deal breaker if anybody wanted to pick this guy up for themselves. Today, we were having a look at the ToysRocka. This was the Dark Knight Batman. If you guys haven't had a chance to hit that little subscribe button down below, make sure you do so. We're going to have more videos coming your way. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.